Okay, so I did my assignment on the effects of replacing saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats on coronary heart disease, and my name's Matthew Cabral. So the topic and objective of my assignment. As we know, saturated fats are attributed to many health issues and generally should make up a minimal part of our diets. The study I read conducted trials to see the effects on coronary heart disease specifically, and what would happen if we replaced saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats. The study's been conducted before, however, major variables were not accounted for. The aim of the study was to account for the major confounding variables in the trials and emphasize the results from those trials that most accurately test the effect of replacing saturated fatty acids with mostly polyunsaturated fatty acids. So clinical trials were identified from earlier analysis, and then relevant trials were categorized as adequately controlled or inadequately controlled, depending on whether there were substantial dietary or non-dietary differences between the experimental or control groups. Those groups were then subject to different subgroup analysis. So what are saturated fats? Saturated fats are generally high in cholesterol and can put you at an increased risk of heart disease and cancer. Saturated fats occur naturally in many foods, mostly from animal sources including meat and high-fat dairy products. The American Heart Association recommends aiming for a dietary pattern that achieves 5 to 6% of calories from saturated fats. That's about 13 grams of saturated fat per day on the standard diet. So some sources of saturated fats. They're very prevalent in the diet of many Americans, and some common sources include like beef, pork, poultry with the skin, butter, cheese, just to name a few examples. So what are polyunsaturated fats? Polyunsaturated fats are different than saturated and trans fats, so they can help lower your LDL cholesterol, which is your bad cholesterol. Cholesterol is a soft, waxy substance that can cause clogged or blocked arteries. And then polyunsaturated fats also include omega-3 and omega-6 fats. Sorry about that. These are essential fatty acids that the body needs for brain function and cell growth. And your body can't produce it on its own, hence they're essential fatty acids. So some sources of polyunsaturated fats include walnuts, sunflower seeds, fish, just to name a few things. So how the experiment works. So the experimental group was told to consume a limited amount of trans fatty acids or avoid them, while the control group had no restrictions at all. There were multiple different diets where specific groups were told to consume animal fat or hydrogenated shortening, and others were told to eat things such as saturated margarines. The varying diets composed of different sources of fat were analyzed into a chart. So this is what they pulled as results. On the right-hand side, it shows the risk ratio, and on the left-hand side, they just use different abbreviations to show the different testing that they did. So what it all means. The chart shows the risk percentage of coronary heart disease, or CHD. The evidence from adequately controlled trials suggests replacing saturated fats with mostly polyunsaturated fats is unlikely to reduce CHD events, CHD mortality, or total mortality. So when the results of all 11 trials were pooled together, it appeared that replacing saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats significantly reduced the total CHD events, but not major CHD events. And then CHD mortality or total mortality were also not affected. However, those analyses include results from inadequately randomized trials and inadequately controlled trials. Ultimately, the results of this analysis suggest that replacing saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats is unlikely to have either a beneficial or an adverse effect on CHD events, CHD mortality, and total mortality. So, my impression of the experiment. I found that the results of this analysis were kind of shocking, as neither beneficial and they weren't any adverse effects on coronary heart disease specifically. I assumed due to the high cholesterol attributed with saturated fats that there would be conclusive evidence to suggest that saturated fats would lead to coronary heart disease. So I have a video just breaking down the different types of fats, just kind of like a refresher of everything that was represented, as all these fats were in all the diets. there's that. And then just a summary of the report. So while the study didn't give conclusive evidence of a decreased risk of coronary heart disease, there are still benefits to replacing saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats. So less cholesterol is good for blood pressure as well as a decreased risk of cancer and heart disease. Fats need to be consumed in moderation regardless of which type, but it appears as though coronary heart disease has a lot to do with diet as a whole, as well as your family history, more than just whether you're eating polyunsaturated fats or saturated fats. And then here's my bibliography of my sources. All right, thank you.